Today we are going to be going over prompt hierarchy. In order to dive deeper into what exactly a prompt hierarchy is, we need to first define what exactly a prompt is. So a prompt or prompting can be defined as the amount of instruction you give your client when having or asking them to complete a task or a skill. Now that you know what a prompt is, let's define what exactly a prompt hierarchy is. So a prompt hierarchy puts the levels of prompts in order of how intrusive they are. Today we're going to be going over 6 types of prompting. There are different levels within each type of prompt, and we may only touch on a few of those in today's video. So before we go into each type of prompt, let's talk about why we use prompting in the first place. So prompting is important when teaching skills, especially new skills to our learners. It helps reduce errors, which can help reduce frustration that may be caused if many errors are occurring. And it also teaches the learner the best way to reach the goal that you are aiming for. So when you think of a prompt hierarchy, you should imagine a pyramid shape, like the one on the screen in front of you. At the top is independent responses. This is where the learner is not being prompted at all during their response. They are doing it independently. Going to the next level of the pyramid, you would see that it says visual and then verbal. Stepping down from there is a gestural prompt, and then it is followed by modeling and then partial physical. At the very bottom of the pyramid is where you are going to be seeing full physical. Now, with physical prompts, sometimes they are just, if you see it on a different pyramid, physical prompts are grouped into one, but on this specific one, I separated them into partial physical and full physical. Now, there are 2 different terms we like to associate with what type of prompting that we are going to be using. Those are least to most prompting and most to least prompting. Now, as you can see on the pyramid shown, there is one moving up while the other is moving down. So the most to least prompting, which was the arrow moving up, uses the most intrusive prompts, and it fades as you go up to the prompt levels. And then on the opposite side, you'll see the arrow going down, and that is least to most prompting, and that uses the least intrusive prompts and increases as you go down. So it's going to increase as you increase the prompt level that you are needing. And this you would do so if your learner was making mistakes, for example. An important reminder when you're talking about prompting is that you may not have or use all of these prompts in your program. For example, if you were trying to teach a kid to vocally tacting, also known as labeling, you most likely will not be using a physical prompt unless you're requiring them to point to the item that you are having them tact, or vice versa. If you are having a kid receptively identify an animal on a picture card, you may not be using a verbal prompt. The idea that I am trying to express here is that prompting can be a combination of all of the prompts listed here, or maybe only 2 or 3. Each program that you're going to be implementing is going to have specific prompts specified and what kind of hierarchy you're going to be using. So now that we kind of had a little general overview of prompt hierarchy, let's dive a little bit deeper into each of the 6 prompts that we're going to be talking about today. So like I said, independent responses, that's not going to be a prompt level, so we're going to go down to the visual, and that's at the top. An example of what a visual prompt could be, but it's not limited to, are things such as pictures, objects, or words written out on a board. An example of how a visual prompt can be implemented would be using an identity match prompt. So an identity match prompt means that you are going to have 2 of the same pictures, and you are going to show the participant the picture you want them to find, and then they should pick that picture from the array you've set up. So say you are wanting them to find the picture of a cow. You have an array of 3 pictures set up, and you have the exact same picture of the cow, and you're going to show the learner the picture of the cow, and you're like, this is cow, and then you're going to hide the picture, and you're going to show the array and say, find cow, and the learner should be able to find the cow from the visual prompt, the identity match prompt that you had just shown them. Now the next prompt we're going to talk about is a verbal prompt. An example of a verbal prompt could be rule statements, hints, questions, etc. A verbal prompt can be used, for example, when teaching a child how to count. For instance, if you were trying to teach them how to count to 4, you could start counting 1, 2, and then you may say 3 a little bit louder, and the child should say 3 back. Saying the full word 3 is known as a full verbal prompt. You're giving them the full word that you're wanting them to say. Now, verbal prompts can be broken down into full verbal, partial verbal. So you can use a partial verbal prompt and only say the beginning sound of the word. So if you were trying to have them say 3, you may only say th, and the child should, from that prompt, say 3. Um, and then if they don't, you get into error correction, which will be in a whole nother video. So as we continue to move down the pyramid, we are now going to be looking at the gestural prompt. And this is more towards the middle of the pyramid. So an example of this would be pointing to the correct answer, and then the client points to it after you would gesture to it. This could be if you were doing receptive identification and you were wanting them to find the cup, and you told them to find cup, they didn't get it. So you're going to say find cup, and you're going to point to the correct answer, and then the child, you'll restate your SD, and you say find cup, and then because you have the gesture prompt, they should be able to follow you and find the cup. Below the gestural prompt would be modeling. So just like verbal prompts, modeling can have different levels to it. Those are being full or partial. Modeling can consist of verbal modeling or motoric. An example would be modeling how to brush your teeth, and then your client would copy what you have just done. So you're standing in the mirror, you could say to your client, this is how you brush your teeth, showing them all of the steps, and be like, okay, you brush your teeth. And because what you just modeled, they can model it from how you showed them. Below modeling, this is when you get into your physical prompts, and like I said, I split them into 2 different levels. So we're going to start with the partial physical and then move to the full physical. An example of partial physical would be to lightly tap your client on the shoulder after instructing them to line up. And there is many different ways to do partial physical prompts. It could be grabbing them lightly from the elbows and that helping them get up to go line up, or it could be tapping them on the shoulders, any kind of physical prompt that is different from what the full physical prompt will be using. So if you did use a full physical prompt, this would be physically prompting them to line up by guiding them through each step. You're physically prompting them up from the seat if they were sitting down, walking them over to where that you need to be lined up, and having them stand there. So anything other than fully guiding them would be considered the partial physical prompt. So like I said, if you were doing least to most prompting, you're going to go, if you started at independent, you would move down the pyramid, and then with most to least, wherever you started, let's say you started at full physical, you would be moving up the pyramid as you wanted to fade prompts. So fading prompts is going to be important for your learner. You want to get them to that independent level so that they know that skill. And we'll talk about error correction and fading prompts in the next video. But I hope this video was helpful in you understanding what a prompt hierarchy is.